Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I'm here at IBM Think in Boston, and it's my pleasure to have a conversation with Matt Candy today. So look, Matt, I think generative AI came into our world almost like a bang 2 years back. And I think the whole conversation with enterprises was what the hell this thing is. And I think we've got a grip on that to a certain extent. I think very quickly the conversation then moved into where can I use it? Why should I use it? And I think we've got a lot of use cases now across whether it's IT, whether it's business, whether it's customer service. There's so many use cases out there. I think where most of the clients and enterprise leaders are struggling now is how do I make it real? How do I scale it up? I joke that we are living in a world of death by 1,000 POCs right now. So how do you make it real? So given that I have you here, tell us a little bit about how do we make it real for clients?
Yeah. Okay. So great question. And look, I look back over the last year, so many kind of POCs, random acts of AI happening around the place. But as I see the applications of this technology, and like you said, right, enterprise processes, workflows, there's thousands of use cases, right? Productivity, new customer experiences, ability to build new products and services. And so we see certainly the companies that are accelerating the fastest are the ones that are laying the right groundworks for scale. And in my mind, that comes down to a few things, 5 things actually. And so I think about the kind of strategy, value identification, kind of an ROI frameworks that you put around this. So how are you assessing the value and the places that you're going to go after that are broader than just task-based use cases, and looking at how you're infusing into end-to-end workflows and having really clear tiebacks to the business ROI and the value that you're going to create. And we've certainly seen the areas of highest penetration and success for scaling are the ones that tend to be well measured and well metric, like customer service. Measuring average handling time for a contact center agent, being able to measure deflection from a contact center into digital agents. So this kind of value identification piece, one. Secondly, laying a foundation. I use the term AI control center, but think about this fabric and this layer that you need to create in an organization that wraps around all of the generative AI technologies. So you're going to have lots of different models in different places. And so I need to be able to make sure I'm governing all of those models. I'm putting security, privacy checking around them, and a framework that allows me to connect to all of these different proprietary and open source models. Third thing that's really important, the data foundation, our belief that the only true sources of value from AI in the future is going to be how I bring my proprietary enterprise data together with a model to unlock these new sources of value. And so this AI data foundation and how I make that available for AI, critically important. Fourth area, all focused on your transformation operating model. So if you're an organization that's focused on big waterfall delivery, now is the time to basically get very agile, experience-led and product-led in how you do things. And so this iterative innovation flywheel that needs to be in place to move from experimentation through to scale, critically important. And then finally, the people aspects of this. And so when we think about the reskilling, kind of change management, and how we're bringing people on this journey with us. So to me, those 5 aspects are the critically important foundations for scaling.
So those were fantastic 5 points, Matt. But let me ask you this, right? IBM is such a large organization. IBM is a universe of its own. How do you apply those 5 to IBM itself? How are you transforming yourselves using generative AI?
Yeah, so if I think about some of our corporate functions, HR, marketing, right? HR is probably the area that we're most advanced in the company. I think of about 282,000 employees, about 94% of employee HR interaction now happens, through AI, through a digital first AI solution. And so we have layered a natural language AI chat interface, right, over a whole plethora of systems that operate in the HR world. And we've freed up manager time and employee time. We've pushed our employee NPS up massively by effectively shifting to this AI and digital first kind of interaction framework. In our marketing function, we're very focused on applying AI around our content generation and content supply chain. And so partnering with Adobe with their Firefly platform for image generation and creating brands, large language models. So creating an open source foundation model that's trained on our brand guidelines, campaign guidelines, tone of voice, personas, etc. And bringing those things together with a workflow engine to drive a content engine at far faster velocity, lower cost, and in order to drive up effectively personalization. And then if I think about our consulting business, we're 160,000 people, right? Strategists, project managers, designers, developers, application architects, etc. And so we've created our Consulting Advantage platform. And so this is a layer, going back to what I was talking about around this idea of an AI control center. So we've created this layer in this fabric, a single experience layer that wraps around all of our What's Next platform and models, and all sorts of other models, right? Proprietary models like GPT or Claude, Titan, etc. And that allows our teams to collaborate, permission models to teams, and allows teams to create prompts, package those prompts, share those prompts, but to create assistance, right? And so think about, assistance for user story generation, Tecton pipeline generation. Think about assistance that help me with business requirements definition. Think about assistance that help me with wireframing, converting MuleSoft APIs to Java Spring Boot. So think about all of these roles and taking a role-based and a skill-based approach to the creation of AI assistance that we can augment with every one of our consultants. And so, we're incredibly focused on democratizing this to creating almost an inner-sourced marketplace for these assistants, and almost allowing everybody to be part of creating the story of the future and be able to kind of innovate and share more broadly, as opposed to waiting for top-down kind of, here's an assistant, now please go and use it. And so, we've taken a very broad kind of democratization approach to this in the consulting business.
So that's super exciting, Matt. Right? But let me ask you this, right? If you look at large enterprises today, over the years, over the last 20, 30, 50, 100 years of their existence, they've collected a lot of debt. It's not just technology debt, but it's also data debt. It's also process debt. It's also skills debt, right? So and those organizations are reticent to change. There's probably a cultural debt that I should add to it. What's your advice to these large organizations? Because everybody realizes you've got to pay your debts at some point of time, but we keep kicking the can down the road, right? Maybe we'll do it tomorrow or day after.
So a few things. So I think the simplification of the tech stack becomes really important. The decisions around the partners and the partner strategy, and actually, kicking tech debt down the line, now is not the time. I think I start to think about the back office in companies becoming headless and composable, a bit like the front office and what we've been doing in the digital space for some time. And so as you start to think about the back office becoming headless and composable, AI and natural language becomes the new employee experience layer. And so as I start to layer this natural language, conversational based way of interacting with platforms and applications and processes and workflows across my stack, in some respects, it allows me to start masking some of that debt and challenge, allows me to do remediation behind the scenes. And so I think there's a lot that as we apply this across back office systems and processes and workflows that's going to help. And I think there's a huge amount that every enterprise needs to do around reskilling. Your point on skills debt, probably 40+%, right? From one of our recent surveys, CEOs believing that they're going to have to reskill across the enterprise. And so the investment that's going to be needed in time, effort to get people hands-on with this. And this isn't just a small number of people in the IT team or the data or the AI team, but this is everybody needs to become comfortable with how they're working with and using this technology to help them in their daily work. And so I don't think we can hide away from it. I think we need strategies and approaches to do this. And I don't think waiting is the right answer. And I think generative AI and this technology is going to provide us a path to help us, I think, with and face up to some of these challenges that we've got.
So there's immense potential, but it's not a slam dunk. It's you've got to work at it. So let me ask you this, Matt. If there was one wish that could come true, what would it be?
One wish about anything about it, like.
Well, let's talk about generative AI, right? Where we are from an enterprise adoption perspective. If there was one thing that you could change or that you wish you could change, what would that be?
I think, my personal view, I think this is much more a people issue than a technology or an algorithm issue. And so therefore, I think my biggest wish and desire is how we can get to the heart of the people within an organization and the culture of how they work and take away the fear factor, right? Or take away the maybe it's not fear, maybe it's just don't understand, don't know, and I'm busy doing the things that I've always done. And so for me, my biggest wish would be about accelerating the adoption of this technology, because I see when people get hands-on and suddenly the light bulb comes on around how this is going to take friction out of what they do, how this is going to speed up, make their lives simpler, free up more time for creative thought and expression. And when you see that light bulb come on and people realize the impact of this, then they go and they're off. And so for me, my biggest wish is, how do you do that at scale and accelerate that and the adoption of it? Because I think once we've got people understanding and bought in and actually able to work with this technology, then we're going to get the acceleration in adoption. And then we're going to see the benefits flow through and the impact that that's going to have on enterprises, not just from a productivity perspective, but what we're going to be able to do about freeing up the time for scaling into new products and services. So for me, it's about the people, not the technology.
Yeah. No, I love the conversation around scale. I think we are living in a world where there's a death by 1,000 POCs.
Yep.
And I think we've got to figure it out of how do we move beyond the proof of concepts and pilots and actually bring it from the labs into the factory floor. So yeah. Matt, thank you so much. I learned a lot today, and I hope people who are listening in learned a lot. So thank you.
All right. Thanks. Great to see you. Take care.